Hey, welcome. I just wanted to go back to what I had said earlier about the grid and using it instead of built instance. So there's definitely some things that I brushed over, oversimplified, didn't really even realize when I was making that video. And so I wanted to kind of focus in on specifically phase-4 and FM4, and just kind of go into some of the differences that I've learned and have explored a little bit more. So in this Polyg Grid patch, I have a single voice of the phase-4 oscillator, phase modulating a single voice. I've got a really basic envelope here. And I'm just using the SAW algorithm. I've got it at 800%. Similarly, I have it at 800% here. So roughly equivalent, and then I have voice B going into voice R. And I'm just listening to voice R. So it should be relatively similar. So let's just listen to it. Here's the Polyg Grid. And here's phase-4. Okay, they sound pretty similar. So if I go in, now I have both playing at once. So I have a couple things here that I was using to compare, but if I just look, I can see these waveforms are very similar. Almost have them exactly lined up. But I cannot get the phases to line up. And so I've been trying to null them out. I tried to use time shift to get the phases lined up. Didn't really work. Inverting it didn't really help. Part of it, I think, might be this drive. So there's like a filter drive, and this is the only way to increase the volume. Like if you put this at 0, you won't hear anything from phase-4. So even though I have bypass on the filter, you need this for volume. So I think it also might have to do with like the phase of how the input starts. Like if we look at Polyg Grid, like on this one, I have it re-triggers every time that the note starts. I don't know if that's happening on phase-4 or not. So it's not exact, but you can get it pretty close. But the biggest thing is, if I get out of here, if I go into the instrument selector, I'm going to look at FM4 this time because it's easier to show. So FM4 is a little bit different too. You can't really replicate it exactly because it is not oversampled at the same resolution the grid is. So you're inherently going to have a little bit of like digital grittiness to it. And you're not really going to be able to replicate that exactly in the grid. But if we look here, so say we want to modulate voice 1 by voice 2. And we're only listening to voice 2, by the way. I have some reverb on here too. And I have a little envelope here. All right, that's all well and good. But if I want 1 to also modulate voice 2, I'm actually creating a feedback loop here because 1 is modulating 2 and 2 is modulating 1. This is not something you can actually do in the grid without introducing a delay. yes, you can do self-feedback of one oscillator, as one of the people commenting on my first video correctly pointed out. So when I go into Polyg Grid, for example, right here is a self-feedback. But in order to get feedback between the two, I have to introduce this long delay. And this is actually based on the settings of your audio settings. So the lowest you can get it is down to 1 block size. I don't know if it explains that here, but in the manual they say that that's the lowest you can get it. Here it is, 0.02 milliseconds. I don't know if that is 1 block size. I don't know what that is. And generally speaking, this is also a problem with phase 4. So I can't really replicate what phase 4 does in that regard. So if I have 2 going into 1 and 1 going into 2, I'm going to get some noise. So it's not going to be as sample accurate as this is. So just in general, if you have these complex 4 operator, all of this different cross modulation between your voices, you're building a patch like that, the grid's probably not a good place to do that. It's just going to be more efficient to do it within the synth. So definitely I have come around to kind of agree with that. I mean, if you know what you're doing and you know how to set all of these things and understand what they're doing, and you actually need all 4 operators cross-modulating like that, like, yeah, I mean, this is what you're going to need to use. So I also wanted to look into how some other synths handle that. So I think phaseplant's an interesting synth to look at, because phaseplant in a sense is a modular synth. You can add as many oscillator sources as you want. You can add as many modulators as you want. You can do all of this audio rate modulation. And phaseplant actually does let you do kind of this cross feedback thing. So if I have the phase of my first oscillator here, and then I have this one at this 3rd harmonic, let's just do 2nd harmonic. Modulating the phase of this, and then I have this also modulating itself, but I can actually modulate the phase of this again. And as you can see, it does sort of tend to devolve into noise. So we're getting that kind of feedback between all 3. So it's definitely possible to build a modular system that can do this kind of feedback. And I hope Bitwig figures out a way to do it in the grid. That would be really cool. I think the idea of, let's just zoom out here, like a container module. I know a lot of people have talked about a container module, but if, for example, you could have like a special type of container, like an oscillator container that only did the sort of oscillator math, and could calculate these more complex feedback types within the context of an oscillator. Maybe that would be an excuse to break the rule for not allowing feedback in the grid. So if you're curious what I mean by not allowing feedback, if I just delete this and I try to draw this line, it doesn't let me because I already have a line going from this first one to the second one, so it doesn't work. If I delete that, now it works, but I can only go one way and then I need a long delay, so yeah, that's basically the gist of it. So yeah, I hope this was interesting. I definitely feel like at some point I want to go back and sort of redo the concept of that first video I made with a more nuanced take on all of this, but I hope this is a decent way to amend some of the claims that I made, because I still think the grid is a really great way to kind of build out these ideas. But if you're doing more intense, deliberate FM sounds, yeah, using, FM4 phase-4 is probably a better approach. So, yeah, I hope this was a good video. Gonna try to do something a little different next time, but thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.